Please give a big clap. Oh, there's another one in the audience. Come up. Asya, climb up. Don't make a fuss. Come up or don't. That's Rashmi from Assam, Bodo writer. That's Kunzang from Bhutan. That's Asya from Kashmir. That's Vaishnavi who put the book together. That's so many of us, our publisher, Manoj. As you just heard, that this is a unique book. It was collected by a whole team of researchers spread across the Himalayan states and different communities, sourced from the region and put together in a way for the first time. There are also prefaces which explain the context of the stories. We have 60 plus stories, so you got lots of reading to do. But it's so enjoyable that I assure you, once you start, you can't stop. And it is indeed a very great pleasure to be here for the release of the book. So let's start then with the speaking order, and you will be hearing each one of the persons right now. So I would request May Elin Stener, our ambassador from Norwegian to India, Norway. Please, if you would give us your thoughts on the book.
Thank you so much. And dear friends in this hall today, I guess we are all fellow lovers of stories. And it's so great to be here today for the launch of this most beautiful book, Voices in the Wind. Namita already said it takes many people to make up these stories, but let me just thank particularly Namita Gokhale, Malashri Lal, publishers, Penguin Random House, and cover artist Nalinakshya, Talukdar, and everyone else in bringing this remarkable volume to life. Last year, here at the JLF, we celebrated the first part of this project, a book of Himalayan folk tales for children. It is wonderful to see this journey continue with this collection for more adult readers. Together, these books affirm that folk traditions are not frozen in time. They are living narratives that speak to current and future generations. So the Norwegian Embassy and Norway, we have supported this project. We called it the project Preserving Folktales and Folklore in the Himalayan region. It reflects some of the core priorities of Norway's engagement with India. First, democracy and human rights lie at the heart of Norwegian policy, Norwegian foreign policy. Supporting the documentation and sharing of cultural heritage helps ensure that diverse voices, especially from remote and often underrepresented regions, are heard and valued. Second, this project contributes to the protection of local heritage and the cultural rights of smaller communities. The Himalayan region is home to extraordinary linguistic, ethnic, and cultural diversity. By recording these stories, this book preserves traditions and worldviews that could over time be lost from wider public memory. Third, Norway and India collaborate closely on climate and environmental issues. And these folk tales add a deeply human layer to that cooperation. Woven into these stories is local knowledge about nature, coexistence, resilience, and survival in fragile mountain ecosystems. The impressive woodcut artwork that features in this book reminds us that form and content together can honor tradition while reaching contemporary readers. Norway is very proud to support this project, and we look forward to seeing how these stories continue to connect readers across regions, cultures, countries in this world. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Namita Gokhale, please do tell us.
I don't have much to say, except that I've done 26 books, and I've read quite a few. This is one of the most beautiful books I've ever seen. Can you hold it up to show them? Any one of, it's got this spine, which is, as I say, it looks like a frog or something. It's green and pretty, and the stories are savage, they are non-judgmental, they are often dismissed as children's tales, but they are a serious branch of study, because their collective memory carries the child's imagination, but contains within it the wisdom of the crone, the cunning of the trickster, the fluidity of the shapeshifter, and the instinctual understanding of the animal kingdom. The ethnogeography of the Himalaya remains embedded with myth and epic, gods and demons, shamans and earth spirits. These stories are savage. They are not Disney for you. They are non-judgmental, they are pragmatic. Nature and everyday human existence fuse. They seem never have to be apart in this collection. Man is a part of nature, nature is a part of man. I return to these stories with their innocence, wit, and deep wisdom. And as I said, it took more than 35 academics and storytellers to put them together, and translators. They are stories for children to know and for adults to remember. They arm and equip the young to unblinkingly understand the harsh truths of life, and they remind the older generations of the enduring ways of the world. That's it now. Now, they have these beautiful woodcut illustrations. So he's going to tell us very briefly about his childhood in Assam and how the stories remained with him and the technique he uses.
Hello everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Namita ma'am and art advisor Tista Bhandari, who believe in me and my craft for this wonderful book. And when it comes to story and the folklore and folk tales from Himalaya, as I am from the northeast Assam, I am very linked with the stories and those mythical visuals and all. So I used to work on the same visuals and all. So it will be a very good experience to work with ma'am and all these members and all. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nalinakshya. The book is just beautifully illustrated, and you've done the old woodcuts, which remind us of Grimm's fairy tales and that kind of vintage. So may I please request Professor Martin Puchner to please talk about the folklore and how it fits into the larger picture of your studies in literature.
Yes, it's a real pleasure, because for me, this is such a fantastic collection. I couldn't put it down. There is just, every page, there's some new discovery and surprise, and it's so beautifully put together, re-narrated, translated, presented. It's a pinnacle for me of a story collection, and like every pinnacle, it rests on a huge mountain range, not just the mountain range of the Himalayas, but the mountain range, I'm a literary historian, the mountain range of story collections. So story collections, for reasons that Namita just briefly mentioned, are sometimes dismissed as for children or just popular literature. And when I study world literature, I'm often struck by the fact that story collections, for me, are probably the single most important genre of world literature. So I want to zoom out a little bit from this one peak and look at that large mountain range that sustain it with an attempt to look at world literature from the perspective of what we have here, from the perspective of a story collection. Now, as we know, the world is full of stories, and if we didn't know, we only have to come to JLF to be reminded of that. And of course, these stories are everywhere. But something very interesting happens when these orally transmitted stories intersect with writing, because then we have the emergence of this form of literature, this genre of literature, of which Voices in the Wind is the most recent representative, namely a collection of stories. And now we have written collections where stories get selected, they cluster, they form kinships, they become these assemblies. I think of these collections like nets that are thrown into the ocean of stories, and they select and gather stories to them and present them in forms like Voices in the Wind. Though it's interesting to see that if we look at the many story collections throughout history, that individual stories often jump from one story connection to the next. So there is sort of a network of stories, and these collections gather them around and frame them. Now, when I look at world history from the perspective of these story collections, I think the part of the world that I associate most fully with story collections is South Asia. I know no place that has bigger, funner, more diverse story collections throughout literary history than South Asia, beginning with the Panchatantra, the Jataka tales, and for me, the pinnacle, and I referred to it briefly with the metaphor of the ocean of stories, the Katasari Sagara, the ocean of stories, and it's really, I feel like, only in South Asia that a meta-story collection would have been invented, and Namita refers to it in the wonderful introduction to this collection, namely a frame tale of framed stories. It's one of the great contributions, I feel like, of India to world literature to have perfected the art of these frame tales, where you have now stories within stories. I think in the West we sometimes associate this too exclusively with the Arabian Nights. The Arabian Nights is a wonderful story collection with a wonderful frame tale, but I think there are many more such collections in South Asia than anywhere else. And I think it is here that these frame tales and the framing of stories was really perfected. And it had a decisive influence on world literature, because with these frame tales, you don't just collect stories, you put a spin on them, you put them to work, whether that's for pedagogical purposes, as in the Panchatantra, or for devotional purposes, perhaps, as in the Jataka tales. You put stories to use. You put them out there, but you also suggest how they can be read and how they can be used in everyday life. Because stories, these folk stories, are used in everyday life. They are not part of some rarefied court culture. They are really how people use stories, and that means that they get something out of them. So this is sort of the first story about story collections I want to tell. It's in a sense a story of origin in South Asia, and it's a story of influence. Because if I look at world history from the perspective of these story collections, I see a decisive influence of these, especially South Asian story collections, an indirect influence on European literature. It's impossible for me to imagine the shape of, let's say, Italian literature without Boccaccio's Decameron. And yet this is a text where a single author is trying to recapture the spirit of these Eastern story collections. It's impossible for me to imagine Chaucer, English literature, without Chaucer. And yet here is an English author that is trying to capture the spirit of these story collections that originally come from the East, and it's an indirect influence, but there are individual stories that we can trace from the Panchatantra, say, through the Arabian Nights, and then all the way to Boccaccio and Chaucer. So there is for me, if I tell the story of literature, of world literature, not from the perspective of, let's say, epic literature and the novel, but from the perspective of story collection, the influence clearly goes from South Asia, via Persia, to the Roman Empire, and then to Europe, where Europe is a kind of belated attempt to recapture, to re-narrate, to tap into that incredible richness of story collections that had come directly or indirectly to Europe. So that's the first story about story collection. It's, in a sense, from India to Europe. It's only much later that European collectors begin to realize, wait a minute, we are actually also sitting on a treasure trove of stories. And so figures like the Brothers Grimm, to which Namita refers also in her introduction, begin to collect these stories as well. And they don't just contribute a new collection of stories, it really changes the conception of literature and culture, away from a kind of high culture conception of literature of the kind that's written maybe associated with courts or universities, but that's really grounded in everyday life, in people, and especially, and this is something that it took the Grimm brothers some time to realize, that's mostly a genre that's transmitted by women. So it really changed the conception of European understanding of literature in a profound way, from a kind of high court culture to a popular conception of literature that's still, I think, prevailing today, and that's so clearly on display in Voices in the Wind as well. So that's sort of a second story. It's a story of where Europeans belatedly adapt and understand the story of story collection and make their own contribution to it. There's a last story about story collection I want to mention very briefly, in that it's interesting that in the 20th century, story collections actually contribute to something that's very important for me as a literary scholar, namely something that I would call the science of literature. And here there's a Russian scholar that is crucial by the name of Vladimir Prop, who collected Russian folk tales. But he didn't just want to look at the motifs and the themes. He was convinced that he could find the formula that would explain all Russian folk tales. And he dissected all these folk tales into 31 individual components and claimed that out of these components, you could kind of recombine and reproduce every single Russian folktale. So this is a very, in some sense, very belated effect of that large history of story collections that actually leads to the origin of a kind of scientific study of literature. So to bring it back to this wonderful book, I think this is not just a pinnacle of this large mountain range of story collections, but it is also really in such interesting conversation with that long tradition. Like Somaveda's Kathasarit Sagara, which of course was commissioned in Kashmir, this book is a product of someone or of two people or many people who've collected stories. And I know that Namita especially, you probably too have spent so much time walking across the Himalayas, talking to people, listening to people, recording stories. Like the Grimm's brothers, you've gone and listened to these stories, and to my mind, your wonderful woodcuts also refer to that German tradition of woodcuts. And so I think that for me, it is really a representative of the most important genre in world literature, and it's great to see it here sitting in front of us. So congratulations.
Thank you for placing this in the context of all the other stories that are the folk stories that teach us so much. And thank you, my dear friend, May Elin and Malashri and Nalin and all the people in the audience. Now, do you want want questions? We have 15 minutes left.
Yeah, if the panelists have any observations to add, it would be interesting having listened to each other's views of the stories.
Well, I imagine that people in the audience would be interested because what I was so struck by is all the people who you've commissioned or induced to translate and re-narrate. The Queen Mother of Bhutan is the author of one of these stories. And so that, for me, I mean, that is the work of imagination and of editing. And I think that the audience would be really interested to hear a little bit of how that worked.
So hands up for anybody who has any questions. I mean, there are no questions?
Yes.
Okay, there's a question here in front.
Hi ma'am, my name is Navanjan. I want to ask you that you are so graceful, the title is The Voice is the Wind is equally beautiful. Where did you find the inspiration for this title?
You know, Malashri and I work very, we said, what should we call it? The last one was called Whispering Mountains. The editor said, what should we call it? And I said, okay, let's call it Voices in the Wind. So inspiration was literally, it came floating in the wind and told us that you can call me this. That's how inspiration really happens. Asya, do you have any questions? Oh, there's a question there, but...
Hello everyone. First of all, congratulations to you for such amazing artwork. I have just a simple theory that everyone has their own stories, their own representations of folklores. We are in Rajasthan. For us, the Rajas and Maharajas are the creators and curators. I just want to ask for each one of you, what does the word folklore actually mean in your heart? Not just the theoretical definition. What is folklore for you?
You tell us first.
Like for me, when it comes to folklore, grandmother is the first author and speaker for me who introduced me to the folklore and folk tales. So for me, another word for folklore is my grandmother.
Grandmothers. What about you, Martin?
I think that's right. I mean, I mentioned it only briefly. It is stories told by grandmother to mother and passed down in that way. And it is really stories that don't exist in some kind of detached, rarefied world, but that I think of them as stories for youth. They have moral upshots. They offer advice. They teach us something. It's literature that really wants to do something in the world. And that's what I think is so beautiful about them.
Well, for me, folklore means a community collectively recalling tradition. And there are examples in our book where the community's continuous involvement in the storytelling by either giving a or some kind of a verbal expression of appreciation and encouragement keeps the folklore going.
So let me also say what this means to me. I outlined why was Norway supporting this project, but I didn't mention also what was very well explained by Martin, how this has traveled around the world. Folklore is something that is local for people locally, but we see the same all over the world. And we also see this in Norway. We had two people, like the Brothers Grimm, that were gathering the Folktales of Norway in the late 19th century. They were walking around and picking up the oral tradition, making it written. Just like Namita and Malashri has helped doing in this project. This is supporting folklore. This is supporting what comes from the bottom up and what are the stories of the people and how do we bring them further and into the future, and how do we take it with us when we assess our present today and also think about the future.
And for me, a big clap for all of them so far. For me, in a minute, I'll tell you what it means to me. Is a dark room in the mountain. It's a bit cold maybe. It's raining on a tin roof, and you're hearing the story, and for music, you have the rain in the roof for accompaniment. But it's also what Mala said, like in Bhutan, they begin ding fu, dang fu, before they begin the story. That's the universal language everywhere, whether it's prop, whether it's any other language, Russian, anything. Once upon a time. That's what it is. Once upon a time, which is also today. There's a question here. So many questions.
Thank you. It was lovely listening to all of you. This is a bit of an odd question. It's for Martin. For our very changing world, can there be new folklore? Can there be new myths? Can there be new gods?
Of course, I'll give my 1-minute response and then I'll ask Martin. But I think there is such a genre as urban folklore, and new folklore is emerging in every city, every part of the world. It's rather like the old thing, but instead of a dark Himalayan forest, it might be an urban forest, or not. But every society needs folklore, folk tales. That's what I think.
I think that's a perfect answer. I think I can't add anything new to that.
Maybe we'll do a collection of urban folk tales.
But I think the form that the new folklore is taking is to take us back to these stories where human beings and non-human species worked together towards environmental preservation, understanding of each other, dependency on each other. Not that the stories don't contain violence and death and difficulty, but they also contain love and understanding. And I think the world is moving towards that.
Yeah. Who else can we give the mic to?
Namaskar, ma'am. I just wanted to ask that we normally see that folklores and folk stories change from area to area. As we change the geographical region, the folklores change. So I wanted to ask you, what are the factors that impact the creation and origin of the folklores?
I'd like to reply in 1 minute and then pass it to others. If I understand it, you're saying different regions have different folklores.
Different folklores.
But it's always surprised me how much the sea turns up in the Himalayan, this thing. I grew up there. A lot of people have never heard of the sea. They've heard of it. They say, we've heard it's very big. Is it bigger than that pond? Is it bigger than that lake? But you have stories even within this of the princess who crossed the 7 seas. The 7 seas are there in many, many folk tales. So because stories travel, they travel from region to region. So you can have deserts, you can have seas, even in the Himalayan stories, and so on.
I totally agree. And it's sometimes, for example, with animal stories, you can see that the same idea, the same story moves, but the animals change depending on the region. So sometimes you can actually track the movement of these stories across space that way.
Like in Europe, you hear of werewolves who turn at midnight into wolves and come and eat you up. Here, there are so many other shapeshifters, like were-tigers. And you can recognize if your husband is a were-tiger or your wife is a were-tiger because they have blood on their mouth at night.
I think my favorite discovery in working on this book was the status of the snake community. The Nagas were very respected leaders of kingdoms, rulers who were kind-hearted and who were shapeshifters. Whereas in other traditions, snakes are not very well thought of. But in the folklore that we get in India, and which continues to be believed in, they are also good people, helpful people.
More questions? Who's got a mic?
I've got a mic. Hello.
Yeah.
Fantastically interesting talk. Just an observation, really. I was in Finland a few years ago, and I met a wonderful Finnish gentleman who told me the story that in the mid-19th century, the Finnish nationalists wanted to create a state, and they were told by the great powers, France and Britain and Germany, you can't have a state because you don't have any great literature. Greece can be a country, but you can't. So they went off and they found their folk literature, which was called the Kalevala. And they became a nation, and they always remembered the power of their stories to make them into a nation by the fact that if you go to a Finnish city now, you will never find a statue of a politician, or a general, or a soldier. You'll only find statues of the characters from their national stories.
That is wonderful. What a deep insight. That was really wonderful.
You know, I have maybe a thought about that, because you're right. There is a slightly, let's call it, darker aspect to these folklore stories, where in the 19th century it became associated with like a kind of almost ethno-nationalism. The essence of the Finnish people is these stories, the essence of the German people is these folklores. But I think story collections don't have to be that way. And what's so amazing about this collection is that it cuts across so many different nations, so many different languages, religions, and at the same time you have some form of commonality, and that's very beautiful. This is not a nation building.
But I'm all for nation building if folktales help us. Or if they help folktales.
Well,
Ever, any more questions?
Namita, let me comment on that too, because I think that's a very good perspective on the nation building. And I think what I said about gathering of folk tales in Norway is exactly that. That I said mainly in the 1880s, 1890s. This is exactly when we were building our nation. We got out of the union with Sweden in 1905. We were in the period of freeing ourselves from after 300 more years being ruled from Copenhagen, Denmark. And this was part of the nation building. And I think, you know, this is not the only example. And that's probably what is happening all over the place, because we are, it's what I also said, the bottom up from the people. We are building our nation. So I think that's a wonderful perspective.
So this will help us build a Himalayan nation.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sneha, and I'm so intrigued by just looking at the cover of the book, and I definitely will be picking up. I'm a Sindhi, and I've grown up on Russian tales and Indian tales. And today, when I want to tell my daughter, I have no Sindhi tales. They're all lost. There may be one or two in the songs.
May I suggest that you collect them?
That's what I just wanted to say, that, you know, this has just given me an idea. Why don't I start? Because I don't have a whole set of generation with me. So now, yes, I will definitely. And thank you so much for one.
If you do collect them, tell us. We'll get you to read them at the Jaipur Festival.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. I don't think we have time for more questions.
We're through. 1 minute, 28, 27 seconds.
So can we take more questions?
We can take one question.
Okay. Go ahead.
Congratulations on the book. I will just keep my question very simple. Like, does the bits of nature change the soul of an author? And if it does, I just want the panel to comment on it.
I didn't exactly get the question. Could you understand?
Does the nature, the voices in the wind, you're saying mountains and seas, does it change the soul of an author to some extent?
Change the story?
Change the soul of an author.
Of course it changes the soul of an author. All of you speak, but I would like you to speak first, because you have done the stories.
Yeah. But I don't know about the author's perspective, but as an artist, this story, the whole stories, the project changed my practice when it comes to my own artistic views and all. It changed a lot. Like, I used to work for the mountains and Himalayan regions, and how I see the cloth drapery on the mountains, scarves. So this book really helped me to clear the vision in that particular thing. So for that, I would like to again thank you, ma'am, for the project and all.
Martin, you?
Well, I was just going to point out that, and as you also say in the introduction, that this book is really about place and about nature and the mountain lakes, the valleys, everything. It's suffused with place.
What surprised me the most was the birds, because the thing that unites across is the Himalayan birds. They have slightly different personalities in different places, but be it the crows or the sparrows, they have their place. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I love the spirit tales because it makes the world of so-called reality and the non-reality come together. And the spirit tales have so much wisdom that I certainly was changed by that.
On that note, I think you give us a big clap.